you very much.
So good afternoon again. Thank you very much for coming to this side event. In this side event, we are going to explain with a certain detail the William model that has been, sorry? Can I start? Yeah. So I was saying that in this special side event, I would like to thank first to the organization of the SDEWES conference, Professor Nevenduik, for the opportunity to have this kind of a special event in this exceptional framework. And we would like to explain a little bit about some details of the William model that we have developed in the framework of the LOCOMOTION European project. I would like to say first that it has been a very huge work with many research groups from very different countries along Europe, even outside Europe sometimes. And it's quite difficult to explain in a few words, in a few sessions, all the work that are behind this presentation, all the equation, all the numbers, all the data. But even after this big effort, the results may be not sufficiently attractive. Anyway, I hope all the people that are here, obviously it's not the people that have been working in the project, but all the people that are here in this session will be able to explain at least the main features of the model, of each part of the model, the modules, and hopefully I would like that everybody will be engaged to the model and will be follow the new features, the new versions, and the new results that we hope to produce in the next months, years, and for a long time. Okay, it was just a short introduction. In the project, we have been working, as I said before, several partners from Europe, but Inigo is the technical coordinator of the project. He's going to explain a review of the project and overview of the model. And later, some of the leaders of the work per module will explain the different modules: geographic and society module, economic and financial, energy, materials, environmental, and finally the interlinks between modules. And we will have time for some questions and discussion about the model after these presentations. So, Inigo, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So my role now is to give an introduction and explain the motivation of the project and the main objective, which was to build a new integrated assessment model. And then I'm going to give the floor to my colleagues to present the modules. No? So I don't know if anybody from the public has been this morning or this afternoon in the special sessions about the papers, but this presentation is going to be, let's say, a more structured presentation, trying to describe the methodology of each of the modules. Okay. Okay, so as Luis Javier mentioned, this is let's say a big H2020 project, 4-year project with a budget of 6-7 million euros with many partners. So there are partners from many countries in Europe. And the main objective we can read is LOCOMOTION aims to enhance the existing Medea SIAMs to provide policymakers and relevant other stakeholders with an open source, well-documented model to assess the feasibility, effectiveness, costs, and impacts of different sustainability policy options. Okay, so first I would like to start with the context. We are in a context of environmental and social and sustainability. So I think this is not a news for anybody here, but it's very important to highlight and to have in mind because it's the main motivation to develop integrated assessment models. So in terms of environmental and sustainability, for example, if we take as reference the planetary boundaries framework, I'm repeating myself for those who have been here this afternoon. we know that 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries have already been transgressed. No? In this figure is everything that is in red. We have climate change, which is the most popular environmental problem and the most studied, but we have many other problems in terms of novel entities, biosphere integrity, land system change, freshwater change, biogeochemical flows. So it's very, very important that when we try to solve one of the planetary boundaries, we ensure that we don't create problems in other planetary boundaries. And then we have the other side of the coin, which is related with the basic human needs. No, at the end, if we are depleting resources and we are affecting the environment, is because we are trying to cover needs. But the paradox is that even with this high level of environmental and sustainability, we are far from covering basic human needs for all global people. No, so we have problems in terms of life satisfaction, sanitation, poverty, etc. Okay, so because sustainability is multidimensional, we need multidimensional tools. And this is the motivation to build integrated assessment model. So integrated assessment model basically means the key word is integrated, is expertise that traditionally have their own models, like for example, economy models or energy models or demographic models, to link them and to gain insights from this integration. Because we are studying environmental sustainability, we need to have not only human system, but we need to have representation of Earth systems, atmosphere, ocean, etc. So the main idea is to see where the current trend leads us, and then to try to identify which policies could be put in place to correct them. So I'm just going to give an example about this benefit or interest of linking, no? Because you think that you have a model focused on a specific topic, and this can be an energy model, economy model, etc., which has some exogenous inputs, and then you obtain some outputs. Okay. So for example, you have this input and you obtain this output. Okay. It's just an example. But what happens if you couple this model with another model in a way that the output of module A is an input of module B? So this can change totally the behavior of what was happening in module A, and only with one feedback you can obtain radically different results. So this is the main motivation to integrate. So even with few feedbacks, you can obtain totally different results. You don't need to have 1,000 feedbacks. You can have with little amount of feedbacks. This is a bit the idea of complex system approach, no? We are trying to focus more on the interrelation between different dimensions rather than on the detail. This is a bit the philosophy. So if we overlap the planetary boundaries framework with the social foundation, the social basic needs framework, we obtain what is now famous, and it is called as donuts economics. No? So the idea is that we avoid scenarios in which we trespass the ecological limits, but we are able to supply basic to cover basic human needs for everybody. So basically, we are trying to find pathways that are in the inside part of the donut. Okay, so for people familiar with integrated assessment models, you know that there are many models there. So why to build a new one? So we had many motivations to build a new model, because it's a reality that even if there are many models share many common assumptions. So there is a false idea of diversity. So here I have listed some key ideas, but in the presentations of my colleagues, they will explain in more details others. No? So, for example, many EAMs, even I wouldn't say they have an economic module. They just transform GDP per capita in some kind of physical demand. No? So this is what I write here with an often too simplistic representation of economic process. So we have an economic module. Then there are some dimensions which are very critical for these boundaries I explained, which are totally absent or very absent for most models. This is the social dimension, the material dimension, and the financial dimension. Then there is another assumption, which is quite widespread, which is the assumption of very high energy potentials, both for fossil fuels and for renewables. And then the issue of ROI, which is some before the session before it was explained, no, you need energy to get energy. This is also which is usually outside of the picture. Then the IAMs traditionally have been very conservative with relation to the transition, no? And they have relied on many speculative technologies, typically based on CCS, and many of them couldn't even reach 100% renewables, no? This is slowly changing, but this is the history. Then, of course, if you don't have an economy module, you cannot capture properly energy economy interactions. Because there are many, the state of the art is saying that the energy transition will have a strong economic impact. So if you don't have economy module, you cannot see it. And then another novelty is that we are making an effort to include a portfolio of heterogeneous policies, because one novelty is that we are trying also to be more pluralistic in terms of the scenarios represented. So we would like to check green growth, Green Deal, and also post-growth scenarios. As I mentioned before, post-growth scenarios are outside of IPCC framework for the moment. So summarizing, our idea is to try to capture socioeconomic implications of the energy transition, accounting for biophysical constants. Okay, so now I'm going to give some common characteristics of the model, general characteristics. So it's important to have in mind that this is a multi-regional model in which we have 8 global regions, 9 global regions with the EU. You can see here the picture with the colors. And then in some modules, we have the EU members model separately. Okay. In terms of methods, well, we use many different methods. We are very different modeling groups and different fields. So we use system dynamics in general, but we combine with input-output analysis, life cycle assessment, econometric analysis, etc. One challenge that we have been facing in these 4 years, and we will continue in the future, is the challenge of making consistent the monetary and the physical dimensions. It's like you have the economy module and you have the physical dimension, and it's 2 sides of the same coin. Everything has to be consistent. The model actually is very large. Now we have over 7,000 symbols and 1 gigabyte with the data and so on. So it's very large model. One important characteristic is that we have made an effort to make it modular. So this means that it's relatively easy to run the model with one module disconnected, or you could replace one module by another one. We have also been working in coordinated and distributed programming. More or less, we are working between 10 and 15 active modelers from different countries. So this required to set up a GitLab. Well, in terms of validation, we are working on it. There are different techniques, and I don't have now too much time to talk about that, but this is an important thing. So one important thing is that the model, even if many parts of it are already finished, still some pieces are not working. So I always say that a model is like a puzzle, and if you have 3 pieces missing, the model does not work, the puzzle is not finished. No? So we are a bit in this situation. But when it will be finished, we expect to address questions such as how can we reach 100% renewables in different countries? Which policies will be more relevant? Then we will be able to check the impacts of the energy transition on very different dimensions. Economic structure of different countries, people in the society module, land uses, etc. What are the monetary, energy and material investments to achieve the transition? And not only usually most people are always looking to the monetary investments, no? The material and energy investments are just not there. Then also interesting for us, what are the potential limits to growth that biophysical constraints, and here we could have a long list, but for example, energy potential, critical materials, etc., may impose to the economy. And then, of course, which policies could help us to design a just and sustainable energy transition. Okay, so this is the introduction from my side, and now we are going to have interventions from my colleagues to explain the different modules. So we are going to have demography and society, economy and financial, environmental, energy, materials, then a discussion, and then we can see some how the model is going to look when you can run in the different applications. So these are the modules of William. I think you cannot see some of the colors, but now everybody will overview through it, and this is with the linkages. Okay. So I think Gonzalo.
Thank you very much for attending this session. Well, in this conference, we are discussing about the energy transition. Sometimes we forget one of the also important things, which are human beings. We can imagine a 2050 with more or less airplanes fueled by alternative fuels. We can imagine the buildings installing heat pumps or running in a full decarbonized with full decarbonized technologies. But sometimes there is also other social variable, for example, the resistance or the social acceptance or social awareness for these technologies. So when we review the literature, the specific literature on integrated assessment models, we find, for example, on the left, we find that we are more or less in the middle, the demography and society, and economy is on the top. But what sustains everything is biosphere. And we need to relate all of them in the model. And when the literature is reviewed and we plot figures like the right one, which means that in bubbles we have the relevance of the topic in the literature of IAMS. We see that population is here. All of the IAMS contains population, but society is more or less totally forgot. And the most cited topics are economy and energy. Sometimes climate and environment, but most of them the two first. And why? Because we have a viewpoint based on technology mainly. Our purpose in the working package 5 of this LOCOMOTION project is to treat society as something in the middle, something to focus on society and to focus on the modeling of demographics. Because obviously the labor force, for example, comes from how many people are living in the region, and the consumption of energy comes from different households, and so on and so on. So the challenge is high because sometimes the modeling we can model based on the statistics, but in other cases we cannot model, for example, the awareness, or very with a still acid approach. Okay, so our in order to we want to integrate some implications related to human beings, such as the aging population, for example, the dependency ratio in the society, related also with health, migration, which is also relevant, the annual flows of migration between regions, inequality, which is also related with social events, education and well-being. For now, the demography model overview looks like this. We have, well, here the legend. We have some databases, mainly one, in the demographic module. We use United Nations database to feed fertility data on fertility rates and the historical gender ratio to generate births that is an input into the stock of population by age, sex, and region. On the other hand, we have an exponential regression model to estimate mortality rates based on the life expectancy at birth, which is moved through a policy scenario or an endogenous linear feedbacks from 3 different variables: the average schooling time, the government expenditure on health, and GHG emissions. We have here a switch to switch on off the exogenous or endogenous approach. And finally, well, mortality rates obviously calculate the deaths, which is an outflow of the stock. And finally, we have here bilateral flows between all the regions based on a paper, a specific paper treating the issue. And all of them, with this stock, we feed the rest of the model in terms of the physical human beings, right? Sensitivity analysis, here I plot this plot is based on sensitivity analysis that determines how different values of an independent input affects to a particular dependent variable under a given set of assumptions. For us, this is based on the maximum and minimum historical values of fertility rates. This is the evolution of the world population over time from 2005 to 2050, and the rank of uncertainty. So we are more or less like in 2023, and we have surpassed the 7 billion people in the world. But if we go also further, we have model based on microdata on household composition in Europe. We can analyze also examples like this, which is the evolution of based on the evolution of household composition in Europe, specifically in Spain. In the top, you can see the structure in 2015, and in the bottom, you see in 2050, with the average, based on average values of fertility rates and mortality rates. In this case, we can see more sparse, household with singles in rural areas, for example, or less sparse, less less couples, more couples in more singles also in urban areas. Regarding the society module, we have used Eurostats as a database to feed the annual variation of households, as I said. And here in the bottom, we can see the World Bank database to feed the years of education, so mainly the educational levels, the educational stock. The society module for now only calculates the 2 main outputs, the Human Development Index by region and the global Gini Index to assess about inequality. Based on also we take information from the demography module to have a feedback on the net based on the net immigration into the workforce. So at the end we have the workforce by educational level and region, as I show here. For example, in France, we can see here in this scenario we switch on and off the feedback to the labor market So for example, the first line on the left, here it says that we switch on with the low, so we plots the female workforce of low educational level in France when the model is switched on, and the rest is the male with low, medium, and high level of education. So this kind of analysis can be done in William now. And this not me. So and to finish my part, here are some further work to do, and what we have integrated now, we are in what William has integrated is the household composition by income, the number of households and consumption, or the energy consumption of households and so on. The education and workforce are already integrated, and general indicators such as the Human Development Index. The missing critical features we have reported in the last deliverable are the next. Then we need to endogenize the life expectancy at birth with more variables, also fertility rates. The migration flows are okay, but we think we can endogenize a little bit better with other variables, for example, from the climate model, to calculate better the migration flows. Also, we are going to try to endogenize the household composition. We have seen some mistakes or difficulties to endogenize, specifically in those regions which are small. And the health module is not present in William for now because it's very challenging, but we're working on that. And the last two is the validation of the education sub-module based on historical data, and the governance and social movement. For example, we can think other social related topics to model or try to represent realistically in the model. And finally, there are three major missing intermodule feedbacks. So a feedback between energy, for example, and population, or diet, for example, and nutrition is a clear feedback from the land module to the demography and health. The second is the water quality affecting society variables, health again. And finally, the economic condition in households that affects demographic variables. So if you have more income and more educational level also, what happens with fertility, with fecundity, what happens with mortality, and so on. And I would like to invite Iñaki Arto to the floor. Hi, you want questions?
Yes, we can we can have at least 5 minutes, or maybe at the end of the. I think
We have a discussion at the end.
Yeah, I think yes, the organization of the session is just like we have all the presentations, and at the end we have a discussion time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Well, I'm going to introduce the economy module. For those that you have already attended to previous session, this is not going to be something new for you. Why do we have a economic model in William? Well, basically because most of the environmental impacts and degradation that we are facing, that already have seen with these planetary boundaries, are coming from the economy, from the functioning of the economy. We have the resource extraction activities. With this resource extraction, we have transformation of resources into products, and we generate a lot of pollution there. We use resources, we have transformation, international trade, etc. We have many different dimensions of the economic system that are affecting the use of resources, the generation of waste and emissions, the climate change, etc. And we have a feedback between these environmental dimensions and also the economy. So the idea is with this economic module is try to represent this economic system, all the relations between the elements that we will further show, and also the links between this economic system and all the dimensions of the system, in particular the demographic and the environmental dimensions. And the ultimate aim is to understand all these relations and between the economic activity and the global societal challenges that we want to address with the model, in particular climate change and resource depletion, inequality, human development, sustainable development, etc. And finally, we are building this tool in order to support the design of alternative futures to cope with these challenges. So the idea is that the economic model, the main approach is a dynamic econometric multi-regional input-output model in which the 35 regions, William regions are represented, 8 regions plus 27 EU member states. We have 62 sectors. We have 60 types of households that are consuming 19 types of products and services. And the model is extended in order to endogenous model the final demand. In this sense, it's quite similar to the CG model, but in other sense, in other dimensions, it's quite different, in particular, and how the markets works. It doesn't work like in a CG model. It works in a new Keynesian approach in which the market are not cleared by price mechanisms, but the demand is the one that it is, and the different supply constraint is the one that determines the output of the different industries. And the model is specially designed in order to incorporate the feedbacks between the economy and nature, the monetary and the physical worlds, in particular the links with materials, energy, land and water modules, and as well as capture also the feedbacks coming from the materials and energy module, and also from the climate system to the economy. And also it has feedbacks between the economy and society, as Gonzalo already mentioned. These are the dimensions of the government, and this is more or less the different components of the model. On the top, we have the demand components. We have the households. Here we have 60 households for each of the EU 27 member states, plus one representative agent for the 8 regions that are consuming different type of goods. You have durables, non-durables, energy goods, transport, etc. And they are receiving income from different sources of the model. They are receiving income from their labor compensation. They are receiving income from profits. They are also paying taxes to the government, but they are also receiving transfers from the government, etc. The government also have revenues from the different taxes in the economy, from income, from wealth, from profits, from products, from production, and we have also investment. And the government has also consumption and investment. So this, the aggregate of this makes the total demand of goods and services of the economy. And these goods and services has to be produced. And here we have 62 sectors that are producing these goods that can be produced domestically or can be imported. Okay, so we have also international trade between regions. And in order to produce these goods, the sectors has to use inputs that can be inputs from other sectors, or can be inputs in the form of energy, in the form of labor and capital. Okay, and then we have also price mechanisms that are also linking the different parts of the model. And this model is, these different modules are interrelated between them, but also with other modules of William, the society, environmental, energy, and materials. What do we have in the household consumption module? as I already mentioned, we have a heterogeneous approach in which for most of the countries, we have different households. We have 60 types of households according to the rural-urban location, to their composition, and to their income level. So this is especially relevant to address the distributional impact of climate change policies and scenarios. I will skip that. I already mentioned, this household have income from different sources, and depending on the situation, the specific characteristic and preferences, they decide how much they consume. And in order to estimate, and we have estimated this reaction, these parameters using different information from expenditure, income, and wealth. Have our expenditure income wealth data set that we have created within William, and also data from OECD and Eurostat. So with this information, we estimate the parameters that say how the different households react to changes in their income, in their prices, etc. And this household consumption model is also linked to other sub-modules, in particular to the energy and transportation bottom-up model. So in this regard, here what we produce a total demand of transportation for each household that it is sent to the energy module, and in the bottom-up transportation energy module, this total passenger kilometer demand is split into different modes. Then it is transformed into expenditure in the different modes, in rail, in fuel for driving, etc. And that comes back to the energy, to the economy module. And then it enters in the production system. And the model, this module, as Gonzalo has already shown, is also linked to the demographic module. In the first production submodule, what we have done is to first create a new multi-regional input-output data set that has to be adapted to the William needs, especially in terms of sectors. We have disaggregated some of the sectors that we think that are critical for exploring energy transition, in particular, all the extraction sector, like hydrocarbons and metal sectors, all the sectors related to energy transformation, and transport sectors. So this enables us to make the connection between the monetary and the physical worlds that Inigo was saying before. We have endogenous technological chain, especially in all what it is related to energy. In the energy model and the transport model is a materials model. The idea is that we have changes that are coming bottom up. There is substitution, for example, in the production of power between fossils and renewables, and that has an effect in the structure of the economy. And we can capture that. We have also dynamic trade structures, depending on, I will show you later, depending on the evolution of the prices of the different regions, there are changes in the trade structure that affect the structure of the economy. And we have also demand-induced technological changes. This means that households react to prices and to policies, changing the structure of the consumption. And depending on the goods that they are demanding, the production sector has to adapt. And this triggers also structural change. We have also investment function and a capital stock adjustment mechanism for most of the sectors. And in the case of energy sectors, the idea is that the investment is coming from the energy bottom-up energy module. There is a hard integration with bottom-up models of materials and energy. And we are able, as already Ole has shown in his presentation, to capture to what extent constraints in the supply of resources, for example, in hydrocarbons, affect the economy. We also capture the impact of climate change in the stock of capital. Then we have also a government submodule that it is based on the system national accounts. And here where we capture all the revenues and expenditures of the government, the debt, the deficit, etc. And these links are obviously linked to other parts of the model. For example, are linked to the household model in the sense that the government is collecting taxes from income and wealth of households, from the consumption of household, the VAT, etc. And also they give transfer to the households. This is something that normally is not included in the integrated assessment model, but we think that it is quite relevant. These are the type of taxes that we have, and we have also transfer, and these together with the heterogeneity that we have in household enable us to analyze to what extent fiscal policies has distributional impacts. For example, if you put a tax on CO2 emissions, probably is going to affect more to rural areas than to urban areas, because in rural areas they don't have access to public transportation, etc. So we are able to analyze which are the households that are affected for a specific policy. Well, we have also detailed representation of the government expenditure and investment by category. We can split this expenditure and investment, consumption investment according to these categories: education, health, defense, etc. This can eventually be linked to the household module, for example, this to the education levels of the households, and this could be also be linked to the life expectancy and other variables of the households. In the labor module, basically what we have is that, as I already mentioned, what it is demanded from the government, household, investment has to be produced. In order to produce those goods, you need labor. Labor force, the supply is coming from the household, specifically from the demographic module. This is the labor force. And the demand is coming from the output model, from the production module. And then we have a wage curve, that is the price that link all the supply and the demand of labor. And these wages per hour depends on different indicators, in particular from the consumer price index. If you have high inflation, the wages go up. On the labor productivity, the highest the labor productivity, the highest the wages. And also the distance between the unemployment rate, unemployment and equilibrium unemployment rate. If you have a very tight situation in the labor market, you have a lot. You have a very small unemployment rate. If you introduce an expansive policy, what you are going to create is an increase in the wages. So these are the type of mechanisms that we get here, and combining this output per hour, the hours that are required to produce the output times the output productivity, we get the total hours that are required to produce what it is demanded by the system. And considering the hours per worker, we are able to compute how many workers do we need to produce that. And comparing the workers against the labor force, we get the unemployment rate. In the international trade, what we have is the standard in this type of models, Armington elasticity, but basically Armington elasticity compute for each of the products that you have, the share that it is produced domestically or imported according to the difference between the price of domestic produced goods and price of imported goods. And then we have also the endogenous climate change impacts and adaptation. As I already mentioned, the model is fully linked with the climate module. Then this means that when we have an increase in global average temperature, that has an impact in the economy, in particular in the labor productivity and also in the stock of capital. And this has, we are able to compute, to calculate these economic impacts. And just for illustration, for the sake of illustrate the model, I have prepared a very simple example of how the model reacts to a specific policy. In this case, what I have simulated is a CO2 tax to household fuel transportation. You know that now the European Commission is working in the Fit for 55 package, and one of the novelties of this package is going to be that the emissions from transportation are going to be embedded in the emission trade scheme. This means that we will pay, drivers will have to pay for emit CO2. Here, while we have simulated the effect of a carbon tax that starts in 2025 at $100 per ton, and then increases at a rate of 8% a year, I think that is what I put. And then, of course, if we have a nice increase in the price of carbon, that is going to affect the price of fuel. That is, it will consist on the price of fuel plus the carbon tax. You can see here the evolution of the average price of household transport fuel in a baseline scenario, and this is the price plus the CO2 tax, and that will trigger an increase in the share of electric vehicles. Obviously, because driving a diesel or gasoline fuel car is going to be more expensive, people will start buying more electric cars than in the baseline scenario. You can see this is for the aggregate EU27, but you can also see the results at the country level. And of course, this will generate a reduction in the emissions. These are the evolution of the CO2 emissions from transport fuel consumption in the baseline scenario. And this is in the poly scenario. And on top of that, you will have a co-benefit in terms of employment, because basically something that you are going to generate is a reduction in the imports of oil that you are going to substitute by domestic produced electricity. But on top of that, you are going to, since you are going to reduce the expenditure on fuel and increase a bit the consumption of electricity for driving the car. But the net effect is going to be positive in the sense that you will have money to spend in other things that are going to create more employment than the oil that you were consuming before. And that makes, well, some concluding remark. The first of all, we think that this model is novel in the sense that it has a high detailed representation in terms of industry, countries, and household. It's not the typical stylized model that we can find in standard integrated assessment models. It also is novel in the sense that it is truly integrated. We have economy model that it is integrated with the energy, materials, land, environment, and demographics. And we pay also special attention to the assessment of biophysical limits and also to the distributional issues. The model is very detailed, and it is prepared for the assessment of the socioeconomic impact of climate change scenarios and policies. We are going beyond the physical assessment and technological assessment and pure economic. So we are going a step forward compared to other macroeconomic and integrated assessment models.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. So I realize I'm missing the overview of the whole model. So, but obviously, she is always an integral part of integrated assessment models. And I want to give you an overview of what is contained in the William Energy module and with which policies we can already model and what kind of results you can expect from these policies and which dynamics we are able to represent. So up here you see the an overview of the William Energy model. In green are the major inputs to the energy module from other modules. In red are the major outputs that go through other modules, and yellow is the most relevant policy assumption or exogenous assumptions. And so it's hard to read here, but here we have the economic demand. So what Iñaki just explained, obviously the output is connected to energy consumption. So this economic demand is our one major input. However, we are also constrained by biophysical boundaries. So rest potentials are not unlimited, as we already heard in a special session today. So, for example, PV, wind, solar, but also, for example, biomass availability for biomass energy. And also fossil fuels, although the fossil fuel limitation is even deeper embedded into the model via this energy materials economy feedback that we have heard about, and we are going to hear in Ole's lecture a bit later as well. So starting off from here, from the economic demand, we have an end-use submodule that translates this economic demand, which is in US dollars, into kilowatt hours of 6 different final energy fuels. So so this is this arrow here, and this informs the energy transformation module. So this really stands in the center of the energy module, because here we model annual energy balances. So this was one of the design principles also, that we are consistent with the energy balancing scheme of the EAR. So in order to do this, to consistently represent these annual energy balances, we have to know a couple of other things from the current setup of the energy system. So one of them obviously is the current state of the energy capacities. So we need to know which capacities are installed. We need to know about the potentials of renewables. And also we need to account for the fact that especially PV and wind are intermittent renewable energy sources. So so this has effects, especially in high in systems with high shares of renewables. You will see curtailment, and you need to account for this fact. This is something that many integrated assessment models ignore, and implicitly they are over-optimistic of the shares of renewables that they can achieve. So this is something we tackled as well. So let's jump into the preliminary results. So that should give you an idea of what kind of results you can expect from simulations done with William. So word of caution, this is just these scenarios, or these exercises I'm showing you here are not yet a really consistent scenario, but they should demonstrate the mechanics of the model. So you should get a feeling of, if you change something, what's the changes you're going to what changes can you see in the results. So for this purpose, I made this. I'm showing you these 6 variables. So we have total primary energy, we have total GDP. All values here are aggregated for the world, but they are available for 9 regions. So primary energy, GDP, greenhouse gases, electricity rest share, oil price, and what you can see here is the electricity transformation output by power plant type. So in this base scenario, we have no real changes of the energy system. So what we see is, we see GDP rising, we see primary energy rising in the beginning, and greenhouse gases consequently as well. But then at a certain point, around 2040, we see that it levels off. So GDP levels off, also greenhouse gases. And why is this happening? We see here that the estimated oil price, which is endogenous to William, hits a peak, and this limits the GDP growth, basically. So, but this is really sensitive. Okay, so what happens if we introduce more electricity consumption and increase the share of RES? So you can't see it here, but if we introduce 5% of synthetic fuel production, so 5% of the liquid final energy demand, so diesel and gasoline, are substituted by synthetic fuels, this means we increase electricity demand by 25%. You can't see it here, but the total sum of it is 25% higher. Because we are generating our electricity from renewables, you can also see here in the rest share compared, this line is 75% compared to the below 30% we had earlier. And because of a lower oil price, the economy can, at least in the beginning, the economy can grow a bit faster in the beginning. So we reach a total higher overall GDP. And because of the renewables, the total primary energy input or demand is reduced, and also our emissions are reduced. Okay, this is to be expected. However, in this data, we have not considered for the effect of intermittency. So luckily, Gonzalo made a module on intermittency effects, so we can take into account the effects of intermittent energy, so solar and wind, on the total energy output. And this is what you see here. So you see immediately, this is the yellowish line, that the rest share we can achieve is lower. And down here now, I replace this by the curtailment. So you can see curtailment reaches almost 15% of the electricity. So this means that PV and wind power plants are turned off, they produce 15% less electricity than they could, because they are in a situation of the grid cannot accept so much power. So this also limits the, oh God, here you go. Yes, no, sorry. This limits the capacity of our GDP to grow. So this limits the capacity of our GDP to grow. So the yellowish line in GDP is lower, and our greenhouse gas emissions are slightly higher because we use less of the renewables. So if we also activate flexibility options, because we have some flexibility options in the module, which are electrolyzers, power to heat, smart charging of electric vehicles, vehicle to grid, demand side management, stationary batteries. So if we activate them, we can see that compared to this yellowish line, we can accept a higher share of the renewables, even if it's not, we still see curtailment. You see this here as well. So we still see curtailment, but we can accept more. And also our economy is less constrained, and the greenhouse gas emissions overall are lower again. So one important policy is missing on the end use side. So efficiency obviously should come first. It comes last in my example. But in the next slide, I will introduce some transport policies. So a modal shift to more public transport, and also to more electric vehicles. So one would expect that the emissions should go down drastically. So let's see what happens. You already, oh damn it. I was too early with my clicking. It's very sensitive. You can see that in fact, in this last scenario, compared to the blue line, this greenish line is actually higher. So the total greenhouse gas emissions are higher compared to the last scenario. Why is this? Because this greenish line here is the oil price, it's lower. And so the world GDP is higher. So in fact, this is a typical example for a rebound effect, for a Jevons paradox. So we would expect, because of these efficiency gains, to lower the emissions, but we end up with even slightly higher emissions, but also a much higher GDP because of the rebound effect. This is, and this brings me, this is already one of the conclusions of this, that it's really important to look at the whole system. And this is why it's so important that we have, with William, we managed to create an integrated assessment module that is able to capture these complex feedbacks. Okay, besides these results. We also have some other results that I want to highlight. There's obviously hundreds of variables in the module, but some of them are especially interesting, like, for example, the energy investments. So we do endogenously calculate the monetary and material investments for energy infrastructure in the model. So here you see the energy investment as a share of GDP. You can see it ranges between, here we go. It's not working very well. You can see that it's ranging between 2 and 4% in the high risk scenarios. This is already, however, this is also one of the limitations. Currently, this is not linked to the investment matrix, but this is ongoing work. But this is obviously an essential indicator. And we also have a very essential indicator for the material investments, because the concept of energy return on energy invested means that you need energy to produce more energy. And this has real life implications. So in this case, you can see that the EROI is, so the gray and black line are the basically the base case. And this is our scenarios with the higher renewable shares. And you can see that the EROI drops significantly. And estimations are that you should that you should reach an EROI of the system of at least 5 in order for the energy transition to be feasible. So this can become a real limiting factor. What are the takeaways? For one, the system thinking approach is really required, and we have implemented it within William. However, one other implication is also that energy policy alone will not save the day. It's really important to, you cannot look, it's not sufficient to only look at energy, but we have to see the whole picture, including economic policy, including land use policy, if you want to tackle the problems that we are facing today. And finally, the Williams energy model is well equipped to capture those complex feedbacks. And from what I just showed you, it yields plausible results. And yeah, we will try in the coming months, we will try to address some issues that are still pending, and hopefully create some very valuable final scenarios. So, Ole.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ole van Allen. I will present to you the materials model of the William model. I have some good news. There is many new information in comparison to the presentation that I had in the morning. So for the ones that were here, it will be also exciting. So where are we? We're there. That is the materials model, and we will look into interlinkages. First of all, why is it important that we have a materials model? We need materials all the time. So you need materials like fossil fuels to drive your car, to like put energy into this building, but also materials in your mobile phone, in your laptops, and also for technology and energy transition. So that is why we want to track these kind of dimension in the integrated assessment model, because many models don't do that. And there is limitations to it. And many might say we have like the option of substitutions, or we can just increase primary mining and all these kind of things. But we want to look, is that really the case? Is that possible? Which kind of technologies can be deployed? And is there enough available in the world? So let's look at the interlinkages. Like, this is the materials model. It consists in total of 4 models within the materials model. We have like the number 1 is the base metals. We have copper, aluminium, iron, and nickel. I might use this, but not click as I learned. So these are these ones. These ones are integrated with the economic model that Inaki presented, because We have sectors that are matching these kind of materials. So the sector coupling with the bottom-up model is fairly easy to do. Then we have also the materials like crude oil, natural gas, and coal that is linked with the energy model and also with the economy model. There as well, the sector coupling is very easy to do, and that's how we integrated it in the economic sphere. So they are modeled and integrated both with the macroeconomic and energy model in the case. And then we have also uranium, which is directly coupled to the energy model, but not with the economic model. And then we have also 24 other materials that we track, and the demand coming from different kind of renewable energy technologies and sub-technologies. And we track like how the demand develops with the deployment of these technologies. So next one. So yeah, okay, I mentioned that already in the beginning. So why do we do this? But also it is important to mention that we have not disaggregated the material modeling into different regions. And there's a reason why we don't do this. For example, you could model all the different regions of material extractions, but then it doesn't match necessarily with the economic sectors, because the economic monetary streams are maybe registered in other countries than the materials are actually extracted from. So you have to decide and make a decision on either or. So that's one of the reasons. And it would be interesting to maybe disaggregate that in the future and find another solution. Yeah, I mentioned the other points already, that we want to include the biophysical limitations, and that is important to look at the whole picture, because one might say it is possible to deploy all these technologies, but first of all, there's also challenges in like increasing demand. So you can have supply shortages because you have not the material available, but you can also have not the capacity to mine the material in the demand that is arising. That could also be the case. So the linkages are pretty straightforward. In the case of the base materials, we have economic activity. It creates like a demand for a material where we translate monetary values into physical terms. That activates in the metal model calculations like prices, amount of resources available, recycling, secondary mining, primary mining, stock use. And then the metals model is calculating a price based on the tension between supply and demand. And these prices send then back to the economic model, where it's triggering in the next time step again, like economic activity, and from that we derive a new demand in the next time step as well. So in the case of the fossil fuel model, the link is also going over the energy model. So the economic activity creates a final energy demand. The final energy demand gets translated through the energy transformation chain into different kinds of energy utilizations, and results in a primary energy demand for one of for all the three fossil fuels. And these models also model then resources, extraction, investment in infrastructure, and also prices again. The prices are sent back to the economic model, and this economic model is then calculating again the final energy demand for the next time step. So here I will show you an example of the base metal model. I will not go into too much detail, but just to tell you like what we capture. You can see here is the price that is sent to the economic model. Here's the demand coming from the economic model. This is like an example on copper, but iron, aluminium, and nickel are modeled in a similar way. Here we have like different kind of stocks that are representing the resources and reserves. Then we have secondary mining. We track how much we have in use, what is sold on the market, and how much new scrap we have. Then we have scrap and the losses that we have in society. And then we have the recycling that is entering back into the production process. Another really important point to mention is, yeah, of course, we have recycling, and that could be also one of the solutions, but currently our recycling rates are very, very low. Plus the retention time in society is quite long for the materials. They are not immediately available again for new production. So that is something to consider. And we didn't see any changes in material demand, just upwards in the last 100 years, never down. And then we have here like recycling rates, which is influenced, like you can influence the recycling rate, and we track the profit. And also it's important to mention that these materials are classified into different ore qualities. Because in the beginning of the century, we used everything that is really easy accessible and has a high metal content, but this is changing because we mine so much. So the energy that we need to extract the same amount of materials gets higher and higher over time because we exploited most of the good stuff and we have to go in lower ore qualities. And therefore, we also track the energy demand coming from the lower ore qualities. Then we have here the method that we applied for the fossil fuels. I will wrap it up a little bit more quickly. So we have here the same structure with like resources and reserves in the extraction, and we track the cumulative extraction. Here we calculate the tension between supply and demand, which results in the price. And this price is sent to the economic model, and also the price we use to calculate the investment in extraction infrastructure. And here we track basically what is the amount of extraction infrastructure. So we looked into reports that stated what is the amount of active wells in the world. And we calibrated these models and also the previous one against historical price, historical extraction, recycling rate. In this case, there's no recycling, but here we calibrated it against the active wells and mines. So for uranium, we have a different method. We applied the method of the supply cost curve, and we looked in the literature to directly link it, or first of all, we directly linked it with the energy model, and we looked into the literature to deploy depletion curves, which can be modified by the user. We looked at like different estimations and derived the maximum depletion curve, which is looking like this. So you can use uranium, and then certainly we will run out of uranium if we used all the amount, and then it will be not available as a resource anymore. Then we have also the method materials required for green energy technologies. Here we have looked into different sub-technologies in solar PV and electric batteries, and used a comprehensive literature review to look at the material intensity kilogram per megawatt hour for each of these technologies, and considering all these technologies. And then we map the requirement coming from the deployment of renewable energy infrastructure and look how it is impacting on the availability on the resource. So we track basically the amount of reserves that we have remaining, and if we come into a supply risk there. So this is like basically the materials model from step 1 to 4, like the different compositions of the materials model. And now I'll give you some examples, and I will tell you a little bit what we can do with the model. So first, here we looked, for example, at different recycling strategies for copper to see if that is maybe a strategy to alleviate pressure on supply and demand and increase the security of supply. So basically, we worked with a medium recycling rate and a price-linked recycling rate. So price-linked is like we looked at the historical trend of price and recycling rate, which is the top line, and then we increased the recycling rate to a medium and to a high scenario. And we could see that end-of-life recycling rate is able to alleviate pressure on the price development of copper, and also it alleviates the pressure on extraction, on primary extraction. Why is this? It's also alleviating the pressure on copper reserves, so we don't have to go in lower ore quality, and we have more steady supply coming from recycling. So what does that mean? For example, in situations when we model a deployment where copper is highly demanded, we can combine it with a policy that is also targeting the recycling rate and see if it alleviates the pressure and makes this deployment of renewables possible. Just an example of an idea. So we also looked at different kind of scenarios or case studies for the oil model, and this can be done also with the different fossil fuel models. And here we did, for example, scenario where we didn't have the price feedbacks that were described enormously now, or the biophysical limitations from my colleagues. And there we could see like a steady GDP growth from 2.3%. So this is a GDP growth in a scenario where we would remain oil dependent and there's no technological advancement. But this GDP growth is not possible because it would mean we extract more oil than is available in the world. And when we look here, we looked at the different sensitivity for different scenarios. So we looked like, what is the impact when we assume low amount of oil available, medium amount of oil available, or high amount of oil available in society. And there we can see different peaks in GDP, because in this scenario, our society would remain oil dependent. Then we looked also, for example, on the impact of price developments of oil and scarcity of oil on different kind of regions, where we can see that the oil importing regions will be more hit by the oil scarcity because they import basically more, so it drives down their economic development, while other regions that are rich in oil are profiting or like not so strongly affected by the price development of oil. Then we have also looked at the impact of OPEC countries, where we see different price developments when the OPEC is reducing, or the OPEC countries reduce the spare capacity on the market. Then we see that the prices would go up, and if they flood the market, the prices would go down. And then we have like modeled something similar to a lockdown, where we can see we cut private passenger transport by 20%, and then we can see it also reflects in the oil demand, also reflects in oil prices. Why do I show you this composition of different scenarios? This is long-term outlook planning, and this is medium-term and short-term planning. So it shows basically that our model is capable of modeling different scenarios that you're interested in looking. For example, you could replace this scenario also with something related to gas and Ukraine. It would take calibration in the model, but it is something that could be done if you put a lot of effort in finding the right parameters. So this is a huge potential in analyzing different scenarios that you're interested in analyzing in energy policies.
1 minute.
Okay. So what are the main takeaways? So it is possible to link the economic units with physical units, and the advantage is definitely when you have an economic model that has matching sectors. That is something that we still struggle with some of the metals and materials that are really important for the energy transition. It would be awesome when we also link that to the economic model. And the results are, or the novelty is the price dynamic integration, because we have like the real scarcity signals that is driving down the economic development and possibly triggering, when we switch on the link with Lucas, the deployment of renewable energy technologies. Then the results are realistic. When we tested with historical demand inputs, we are able to reproduce the price, the amount of active wells, the extraction amounts, and all these kind of variables. And it's possible to analyze different trajectories for renewable deployment and the impact on fossil fuel and material availability. And it's also, the model is constrained by mass balance equations. And if there's like, for example, uncertainty around the mineral availability, we give the user the opportunity to modify this choice and then see what the outcome of the scenario might be. And it's also possible to analyze long-term, medium-term, and short-term scenarios. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I will describe the environmental model, and then we have 3 parts. The first part I will describe the model, and then the second part I will present some results related to land module. And in the third part, Noelia will present some results from climate module. Okay. So for the environmental module has a disaggregation of 9 regions, and it's connected to various modules such as economy, society, and energy. And it receives various inputs from these models, such as the GDP per capita, population, and also, for example, the demand of land for solar energy from energy module. And also it sends back various outputs, such as climate change, biophysical impacts to society and economy modules, water stress to society module, and also the availability of land products to energy and the society module. So the environmental module has been split into several submodels, and among these submodels we can find the diet and the land products demand submodel that calculates the diet according to GDP per capita, and also policies of diet change to to standardized diets such as flexitarian, wallet, and 100% plant-based or 50% plant-based. And also it calculates the land product demand for energy and the industry. And for the three models included in land that are croplands, yields, and land uses, calculate the changes in land uses, and based on available croplands and agricultural yields, they calculate the agricultural production. And for grasslands, in this model, the grasslands model calculates the meat obtained directly from grasslands and also the carbon absorption of grasslands under several options management. And also for the forest and wood production, some model the forest stocks of forests and plantations is calculated based on the forest area and also the wood extraction, and then it estimates the sustainability of wood extraction, and in the land products availability, the supply and the demand of land products are compared, and then it estimates the shortage of land products by region and also by use, if it's for energy, for food, or for industry. And for water model, the demand and availability of water are calculated. And finally, the climate models, the emissions related to livestock, forests, agriculture, and also energy. And these emissions are then transmitted to greenhouse gas cycles to calculate the concentrations and also the global and regional temperature changes. And using these outputs, we can also calculate some climate change impacts, such as sea level rise and ocean acidification and some socioeconomic consequences. We have applied the two general experiments, the first one for the land model and the second one for the climate model that we will see with Noelia. So for the first one, we have applied two scenarios, two little scenarios, the scenario 1 and scenario 2. And we can see in the table that for both scenarios, we have used 20% of 2019 oil consumption for transportation that will be substituted by biofuels. And the scenario 1, we can see that is a very pessimistic scenario that with no increase in cropland area and also no increase in crop yield. But in the scenario 2, we see that it aims to achieve a 10% increase of cropland area and also 20% increase in yields. And for population and GDP, we have used the baseline in the William model and without any diet change policy. So we start with the global availability of crops. So we can see that we have for scenario 2, we have a deficit of 7%, and this result indicates an improvement, but when compared with scenario 1 and scenario 2 that have 20% and 50% in global availability of crops. And when we compared scenario 2 with the baseline 2, it becomes evident that with an expansion in cropland area and an increase in crop yield, and without increasing biofuels, because in baseline 2 we didn't apply, we have a constant value of biofuels, so we can conclude that in the case of baseline 2, we have a surplus in the global availability of crops of 0.03%. So in the case of scenario 1 and of crops demanded and distributed for energy and food, so as you can see in this figure, so we have the global, we have corn demanded and distributed for energy. So we have this in this line, the demand, and the distributed. So we can see in both uses, food and energy, we have a big differences between the distributed and demanded food and demanded the corn. And the same thing in serious other, but we know that serious other are not very used in energy. So for that in food, we have big differences. And this is because the serious others has been displaced by corn or sugar crops that are used for energy use. While in the case of scenario 2, we see that scenario 2 successfully narrowed the gap between the distributed and demanded corn for both uses, for energy and food. And the same case of serious other that has been displaced by corn and also sugar crops. And now we see some results of from climate modeling.
But in this case, the scenario that we have chosen to show the capabilities of the climate module is a baseline scenario, simpler scenario, business as usual, in order to show you some specifically climate outputs and how they can be used in the rest of the model. In particular, for this baseline scenario, business as usual, here we can see the total greenhouse emissions compared with historical information. The diagram above in the top is the CO2 emissions, and also nitrous oxide emissions and methane emissions. These are the three gases contributing more to the climate change. And oh, there we go. How I can no. Oh, yeah, it's sorry. And then the CO2 concentration also compared with the historical data from the Mauna Loa Observatory, also the calibration. And then the global temperature change compared with data from NASA and also Hadcraft's observation data. This is adapted to prehistorical temperature values. As you know, this has to be aligned. And also, you can see the comparison with the Paris Agreement goals and the limits of 2 degrees of temperature increase with respect to pre-industrial values. You can see that in the business as usual scenario, we are not applying additional policies. Just to remember, this is a business as usual scenario. We are surpassing the limit of 101.5 degrees. That is also creating problems based on scientific reports. And at 2050, we are nearly surpassing also the limit of 2 degrees that it can lead to very important impacts. And the distribution of the temperature change among William regions is also possible in the climate module. You can see the different lines with different colors depending on the region. And in this case, you can see that here we are not surpassing the 2 degrees, but here, yes. And this is because here we are focusing on the land area, the land system. And in the case of the ocean, the ocean system is warming at different scale, the land is warming faster, so that is why it's different. So just to take into account what we are talking about 2 degrees of temperature change, the global temperature change is different in each region, is higher. And also we can obtain some specific impacts as the ocean acidification, that is decreasing the pH, and also the sea level rise that is increasing in the future. And as a conclusions, just to mention before going out, these outputs fit into some other parts of the module. So as, for example, Iñaki has explained, or in the module, in the environmental module, this fits in climate change impacts into the economy and also the environment, as, for example, crop yields. Conclusions, the land module has a specific strong links, as Mohammed has already explained in this session and in the last one. And the purpose is to test capabilities in the land module and the interaction between biofuel demand, energy and food demand, diets. Is more than that. Mohammed has already explained. And for example, some of the results, this is just a test, but it can be used, this model, to this type of test, is how biofuels consumption are affecting the global availability of crops, how diets, including intervene in this type of feedback loops. And finally, the climate module also has strong capabilities. We can obtain emissions, concentration, radiative forcing, and climate change impacts that, as we are using the system dynamics technique, this climate change impact can feed another modules. So the global temperature change can cause impacts on the economy module. So the economy variables are affected, and then in each time step, again, emissions are affected due to this climate change impact. There's a feedback loop that is possible to include in this type of model. And well, this is what I have explained, sorry. This would be next.
Thank you very much, Noelia. Maybe if you want to give some words about the interlinks, or maybe we can start with discussion. Yeah, well, obviously everybody have understood that there is a lot of links between different modules. So everything is related. Not all the feedbacks that we would like to have, but obviously there are many feedbacks between, let's say, energy, economy, climate, and so on. But well, we are going to ship this part in order to have enough time for questions and comments in the discussion time. Jorge Benduik is going to moderate this time.
Okay, we spent quite a lot of time of the discussion already, because we have to finish by 6. I don't know how much Roger would take.
Maybe 10 minutes for you, is that?
Yeah, we have to finish at 18 because they need the Zoom for the panel. But let me do the discussion first, because it's coming first. So first, let's have questions regarding all the presentations up to here. Ilya, you had one question? Maybe you would like microphone? Okay. Luca, is Luca here? Yeah, come on. You're the boss of the microphone.
Also, there is questions in the Zoom.
Yes. If there are questions in the Zoom.
First question is okay.
Yes, of course. If anyone is feel free for discussion. Well, Lucas, I find your presentation I'm thinking about this GDP growth in reality. Today, and we are facing oil price on the 90 and more per barrel. And how is it possible? Is it really possible to have a GDP growth based on renewables later on? This is also connected to the network of oil. There is oil. Oil is here. Yeah. He showed really good example of what can be done by a group of countries that decide to influence the oil price. So this could be a community to say anything about the model and how it can be used.
Okay, I think maybe this GDP growth based on renewables. Actually, what I actually wanted to say was that wasn't that we can grow more, but our emissions don't reduce as much as they should. I think this is more the idea of the problem in terms of we don't reach our emission targets. Because all these exercises that I showed, we still ended up with emission by 100 pounds. And didn't at any point really achieve a real decarbonization despite renewable electricity share of 75%. So but yes, I think the economy, like oil, our simulations and show that it really will be within the next decade. I mean, there is when exactly it will be is really hard to tell. What I also showed that depending on your resource estimate, when exactly the time is, it's 10 years earlier or later, it's hard to tell. But the economy will be I don't want to say curtailed, but it will be restricted to a certain extent from point of view how much output it can create. And if we are not so dependent on oil, we could grow more. But we shouldn't grow more because this brings with it all the other problems, including dimensions we have in models like biodiversity. All I was saying. Yeah. What I would like to say to this is I think what you mentioned or raised there is also
Okay, what I would like to say is like that what you showed with your results really well is like that a policy on deployment of renewables alone is not enough in that sense, because what it does is it alleviates the pressure on the oil, because then we consume less oil, obviously, and the price goes down. So and that means we go not into the scarcity situation, but then it's an economic incentive again, because the price is so low, we can use more of it. And if we don't restrict that use, it will be used. So that is what you see in his results really well, because he said, or like one of the results was that we see a reduction or like the high deployment of renewables, and therefore a reduction in oil use, but then later on the oil price is dropping and then it picks up again. So that is also triggering economic growth again. And if you deploy like these energy policies alone without the restriction on the use of this resource, other countries will use it that don't have the deployment of renewables, for example, active.
I agree with that you need to have some policies in place in order to phase out oil. That's quite obvious. But I have one question. System dynamics should catch quite well what happened in 22. We have disappearance of 40% of gas demand, gas supply from the market. And what happened? Prices went up, demand was reduced. There were alternative fuels coming in, alternative energy coming in, but a part of demand was destroyed. GDP was growing less than it would grow without that, but it was not a disaster. I think that this was a beautiful case of what we are talking about here. And I wonder, could we test William? Could it calculate that?
I think I would start to respond, and then I will hand off to Iñaki, because it's a combination of issues, and we actually discussed if we should model it as a case study. The problem is, there's a lot of variables to consider in this example, in this particular example. It's a little bit more difficult than modeling a lockdown, where you say like, okay, we restrict the passenger transport, and then you can reflect this, because there's other aspects. So you have to cut down like basically the supply of natural gas to the market, but then you have to reflect that as well in the economic system accordingly. And there it becomes more tricky. Like basically we would need time to model it. I think it is possible to model it. And you would basically see these reaction in prices. If the feedback that I mentioned earlier would be activated with Lucas, where we have the OPEX expenditure that he described, then we would see like the high price in the fossil fuel would trigger the deployment of other technologies. And you would see the price spike for the time frame of the restriction of the supply, basically for the embargo on Russia not being allowed to supply to the market. And there it comes also into play with the regional and not regional modeling of the materials. There it would be really good, for example, to have a regional disaggregation, because not every market is affected the same. Oil is more like globally traded than gas, for example. This is like more local systems where pipelines are into place. So there you would have to have a more regional disaggregation, but that could be done by copying the model, filling it with data in terms of regional disaggregation. And I will hand off to Iñaki to answer some of the, or is there anything remaining? No, it's good. Okay. Okay, Ilya.
Let me answer just a couple of words more. In theory, this is the kind of problems that integrated assessment model, system dynamic base, should be able to capture. Obviously, it depends of the, let's say, the quality of the model, if we are able to represent all the variables and so on. But this is the kind of problems that integrates the variables from different nature, let's say physical variables like resources and economic variables. So we are able, in theory, we are able to represent these kind of feedbacks between economy and material. This is our main motivation. Also, Lucas has explained quite well this kind of motivation from system thinking point of view. But obviously, it depends on the quality, the data, our capacity to represent. But
the reason why I think it should be considered as case study, because this is an example in which you can have enough data, and then you can test, does the current assumptions in William produce a similar response of the system? Because we are theoretically putting some assumptions how systems interconnect. And this looks logical to us, maybe, but we have to test that in reality. And this is a beautiful case in which there is a test. Okay, it's just one small region, just Europe, but it is very interconnected. And the waves could be felt all around because LNG market is fungible, oil market is fungible, coal market is, at least international coal market is fungible. So I think from that case study, you could then see, do we have assumptions in William properly set to model a longer term changes?
Yes, just to add something regarding this case study that you are suggesting. Now what it is going on at least from the economist perspective in Europe, is way more complex. It's not just gas. You have huge increases in the interest rates. We have also inflation coming from profits of companies. These are variables that we have in the model, but we should tune. Yes, exactly. In order to replicate the real world. We have also the problem of how the electricity market works. I mean, I think that it can be done, but it will require this is something that is good of William, that although it's a model that it has the structure that it has now, it can be adapted by the user in order to explore these alternative futures that eventually can be like wildcards or can emerge in the way. So it's quite flexible in this sense. It's not something that it is rigid, that this is the model, and you can do the typical things that you can do with integrated assessment model. You can put a tax on CO2, a restriction or a target on renewables. It's way more complex in the sense that you can, and flexible in the sense that you can adapt the model to your real needs.
Okay.
do it.
Okay, so Willem is on the track to solve that because it has a regional distribution of processes, and it's also dynamic.
Wow,
Wow.
Also,
The materials are not regionalized.
oh, and also, and also there is another important point. I'm very familiar with GCAM because it's one of the at BC3, and one of the shortcomings of the current version of GCAM is that it has not a feedback between the energy and economy system. Well, they have released now the GCAM macro, but still it is very stylized a macroeconomic model, and you cannot, for example, employment or a result at the sectoral level. They only have two sectors, I think. Energy and materials. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we have to close here and ask Roger for 10 minutes, please, no more. Well, we can stay here longer, but we have to cut the internet because we need Zoom for another session. Yes.
Okay, so I'll try to do my best in 10 minutes, although it's a bit unfortunate. So the idea of this presentation is to show you the 5 modeling apps that were developed in the LOCOMOTION project, and also some additional tools that I'll show you later if I have the time. So you may be thinking, why do we need 5 modeling tools in a single project? And that's a very good question. It's not working anymore. Okay.
Okay.
It is connected.
Now it's working. Okay. So why do we want these 5 modeling tools for a single project if they are all based on the same underground model? The idea is that the idea that we have with these apps is that we want to reach the widest audience possible. So we want to allow anybody who is either an expert or not with different skill bases that they are able to actually run the William model for any purpose that they wish, and also be able to explore the hypothesis, assumptions, and even contribute if they have the interest, with the final goals of reaching policymakers, allow them to do to do policy exploration with the model, also to help scientists if they want to run the model to allow them to do so, and also to raise awareness and to increase the climate and modeling literacy of civil society. Now here is a table showing the different apps that we developed. So first, there's the William model itself, which was developed in Benzim. This is targeting basically experts, and the model will be runnable using the Benzim reader, which is an application which is proprietary, but it's free of charge. So anybody can install it and run it in their system. Then there's the translation of the William model to Python, which has the only requirement is to have a Python installed in your computer. The model analyzer, which is for experts and policymakers. And in this case, it's a desktop application that anybody can download and use with a simplified interface. The model explorer, which is similar to the model analyzer, but it's a web application, so it runs on the browser, and it's targeting the civil society or the general public. And finally, there's the Crossroads tool, which is targeting students. It's a game, so it's a gamification of the William model. As I was mentioning, the Benzim version of the model is targeting experts. There are two ways in which one can run this model. It's either using the Vensim reader, which is free, plus binary version of the William model, or there's an alternative, which is more targeting scientists, let's say. They can use a paid version of Vensim, which is how the model is developed currently, and use the MDL, which is a text file that allows you to actually see the equations. And this is compatible with Windows and Mac. Linux users are not able to run this. Then for the PyWilliam, this is how we call the Python version of the William model. The target audience is experts. It's built using Python. It's completely open source. So all the equations, everything is totally open source. And it can be run with within any operating system. And this is the interface that the users can use to plot the simulation results. It's very easy to install. So it's a couple of simple commands that are well described in the documentation. And in order to run, you just need to run this command, and you can parameterize it with as many arguments as you want. So you need Python, but you shouldn't be scared to try it because it's really simple to use. And I have very good feedback from users that have tried it, and it's not as complicated as it may seem. Then we have the model analyzer, which is a desktop application that the target audience are, again, experts and policymakers. It's compatible with any platform, again, and you can download it for free and install it in your computer. And here, with a nice interface, you can actually parameterize your simulations or your scenarios, launch simulations. The simulations run on a server, and then you can download the results and plot the results in your computer as well, and export the results and so on. Then the Model Explorer, which is a web application targeting the civil society and also policymakers. This one is a web application, as I mentioned, and it's a bit simpler than the Model Analyzer. So it's a simplified version that has a very similar interface. You can create scenarios, parameterize it with sliders and checkboxes. So very simple to use. And you can plot the results and even export the graphs and so on. And finally, and sorry for going so fast, we have the Crossroads. And this is a game. The target is, of course, teachers and students. It's a web application again, and it has two main roles: the moderator, which is typically the teacher, and the players. And the game can be played remotely, in which case the users communicate through a chat, or it can be played in a classroom in live session, let's say. The objective of the game is to actually reach the best trade-off between global temperature change and economic growth, and the users are presented with some pre-selected policy options that they need to choose between them to get the best compromise between those two variables. Again, there's a chat here in which they need to reach a consensus about their decisions. They play in groups, so very fun game. And just to explain with easy words which app should each user choose. So for the William Vensim, so the Vensim version of William, it's targeting the experts who just want to run the model. They don't have necessarily programming skills, and they really don't mind the licenses of the software that they're using. So they're not very concerned about that. For the Python version, it's potentially the most flexible option because we're targeting experts with, of course, they need some minimal programming skills in order to run the model, but in contrast, they get full flexibility, so they can run the model and use all the Python ecosystem to run sensitivity analysis. They can couple with other models. They can analyze the results however they want. They can run optimization and everything they want. The model analyzer, it's for experts and policymakers that wish to use the William to explore different impacts of policy options from a nice user interface. The Model Explorer, it's actually targeting anybody who doesn't necessarily need to have knowledge about the challenges of the decarbonization, and just would like to learn a bit more about this topic. And finally, the Crossroads, the game, is targeting teachers who want to teach the challenges of decarbonization in a fun way, let's say, because the results are not very encouraging for the kids, but anyway. And then the additional tools that I mentioned at the beginning, on one side we have the LOCOMOTION data client, in which anybody can connect and see the metadata and the data that is used in the model, and also some simulation results for a few scenarios. Then we have the William E handbook, which works as the documentation for the model in a simplified way. And then by the end of the project, there will be a MOOC, a massive open online course that will be released that will also use William to teach about these decarbonization challenges. So yeah, if you want to know more, just go to the website and check this link here, and you will get all the information you need. I'm done.
Thank you very much to all audience. It is a very short time to explain everything. I hope we will be able to have more time or more thorough to talk about that. So, and obviously, as Roger and other speakers has told, you can follow through the web page any news, any versions that we will have in LOCOMOTION project and the William model in the future. Thank you very much again for